Dr. Fauci, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
How should we think about COVID now and the threat it still poses?
Well, it certainly still poses a threat. But if you look at where we were a year or so ago around this time, we are much, much better off globally, and certainly where I am in the United States. If you want to use the number comparison, last year at this time, we were talking about 800,000 to 900,000 infections a day and between 3,000 and 4,000 deaths per day in the United States. Now we're averaging about 300 deaths. That is still not an acceptable number, but it's dramatically lower than what we were before. So we're in a much better place. The only thing we have to be careful of is that with this virus and its variants that keep evolving and the lack of durability of protection, either from prior infection or vaccine, that we have to continue to address this problem.
Would vaccine equity, that is getting vaccines to poorer countries, have stopped some of the variants emerging?
Well, it may not have stopped it, but it certainly would have slowed it down, because we know it's just a virological fact that mutations occur, mutations lead to variants. A virus will not mutate if it doesn't replicate. And the more you have the spread of virus in the community, particularly in low and middle income countries that may not have access to vaccines the way developed nations do, that gives the virus a great opportunity to mutate enough to form a new variant.
Is that the biggest failure of the way we managed COVID, that is, countries keeping supplies of vaccines to themselves?
Well, we're doing better now. I mean, actually, there's been vaccines, almost a paradox, because when vaccines were sent to certain poorer countries, they didn't have the capability of distributing it. The infrastructure wasn't there. So they said, don't send anymore. We have enough, which seems paradoxical because they're under-vaccinated. You want to get them vaccinated. And yet, when you send them vaccine, it's underutilized. That has to do with a larger problem of the healthcare systems globally and the lack of equity of healthcare provision globally. That is an important problem that transcends COVID.
You're coming towards the end of a very long career in public health. Could you have predicted the politicization of science that took place during COVID?
The answer is no. I mean, I've been at my scientific job for 54 years, and my job as the director of the Institute for 38 years. And I've seen political differences and ideological differences, which, at their best can be very healthy, because it reflects the diversity of people's opinions, and that's good for a democracy. But when that difference becomes hostile and divisive to the point where people don't even cooperate with each other, and as a result, you have unnecessary suffering and death in a pandemic. I never would have imagined, to be quite frank with you, that it would have gotten this bad. It's particularly bad here in the United States. I know there's elements of that in every country, but the intensity of the divisiveness in the United States, in my opinion, is just tragic in many respects, because it prevents you from doing things that should be properly done in the arena of public health.
How much of that was latent divisiveness already in the community, and how much do you sheet home to Donald Trump?
I think it was latently there, and that he just came in and just stoked it and kindled it and turned it into a little ember into a forest fire.
Did he cost lives?
I don't want to say that, because that gets, even though you won't do it, someone will make that a soundbite. And I don't really want to do that. I just want to say that we could have done much better had there not been the divisiveness.
You've said that people who refuse to get the vaccine for ideological reasons, that it pains you as a physician. What do you mean by that?
Well, as a physician, which is my primary identity, everything about me, all of my DNA, all of my training, everything I do is to alleviate, prevent, and treat suffering and disease. to try to keep people healthy. And when you see people doing things that actually makes them get in danger, it pains me because it goes against everything I stand for, which is to protect the health and the safety of the human species. In my case, mostly people in the United States, but since the United States is a leader in public health, indirectly it's for the entire world. And when I see that, it is in fact very painful. It hurts me to see that.
Has public health been fatally damaged?
No, I don't think so. I think we can bounce back. And I hope, there's silver linings in all severe challenges that we have. I would hope that the experience that we've been through really jolts us into a long-standing commitment to not only end this pandemic in the sense of making sure it doesn't disrupt us throughout the world and it becomes so low. I don't think we're going to eradicate it, but I think we can get it down to such a low level that it doesn't disrupt society. But we really need to learn from this. I mean, in the United States, we let our local public health system have a great deal of attrition, which was really unconscionable. But then we paid for it when we needed to marshal local public health capabilities, and we didn't do it very well.
Are you completely satisfied now that the virus didn't emanate from a laboratory in Wuhan?
You're not ever 100% certain. So I keep an open mind. It could be any origin. But the one thing that I do place a lot of stock in is that an international group of scientists, not just in the United States, throughout the world, including prominent Australian scientists like Eddie Holmes and others, have carefully looked at it and written very scholarly, peer-reviewed papers in scientific journals that indicate it is much, much more likely that this was a natural occurrence from an animal to a human. More likely, haven't 100% proven it, and that's the reason why I still keep an open mind. But I lean very strongly because I trust those scientific colleagues, and they come from all over the world. They come from Australia, they come from the United States, Canada, the UK, Germany, and they all agree on the data. So I put my stock in that at the same time as I keep an open mind.
We're obviously going to remain vulnerable to zoonotic diseases, spillover diseases from animals. Have we learned enough to protect the world from the next virus?
The lessons are there. Are we going to heed those lessons? That remains to be seen. I mean, there's pandemic preparedness and pandemic response. You're going to have the evolution and the emergence of new pathogens. We will always have that. I mean, it's just happened from the beginning of time. The question is, can you prevent that emergence from becoming a true pandemic? And there are ways to do that. And hopefully we've learned some lessons from our 3-year terrible experience with COVID that might have us do better the next time around, because there will be a next time around.
Are you genuinely confident that we'd do better?
No, I'm not, because I just know human nature. And what happens is that you have corporate memory that lasts for a while, and then other imminent problems take over. And you say, well, I've got to take care of what's clear and present danger in front of me. And you forget about the fact that you need to stay perpetually prepared for something that hasn't happened yet. That's a tough thing to get people excited about.
You say there's always been spillover or zoonotic diseases, but we are changing the way that humans and animals live together on Earth. How dangerous does that make the potential for another pandemic?
It absolutely does. And there's good treatises written on that when you encroach upon the animal-human interface and you do it in a way that is not thoughtful and careful. I mean, like bringing wild animals into a wet market in Wuhan. I mean, that is the worst possible thing that you can do, to expose humans to viruses that originate in the wild. When you encroach upon the rainforest in the Amazon, in Brazil, and other countries, and you bring people in exposure. When you go out into areas where there are bats and you wind up getting Ebola. I mean, the idea of not being careful when you encroach on that animal-human interface, you superimpose upon that global warming and climate change, that makes things even worse. So we've really got to pay attention to that.
Anthony Fauci, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.